will spend more as Rwandans locally and drive the sector forward?
For me, what was interesting is to see the African Union summit in Addis. We are seeing a lot of progress, especially around the ratification of the CFTA, which definitely, hopefully, fingers crossed, by April, I think March is the deadline. Yeah, we'll have the countries on board. So let's go straight into today's topic, the high rates of teenage pregnancies that we have been witnessing across the country. The numbers are out there. We'll be getting into the numbers, but let's try to understand the scale of the problem from a medical perspective. Someone who is meeting these teenage mothers, to sort of give us insight into why should we care that, you know, we have these teenage pregnancies. And I'll begin with you, Dr. Barry.
Well, let's just give you a simple example. So usually what happens is you have a 15-year-old who comes to the hospital. She's pregnant. And usually we see them right from the Isange One-Stop Center. We follow them up until it's time for the delivery. And then most of the times, if she was impregnated by a fellow teenager, he doesn't go to jail. But if it's an older man who impregnated her, then he's probably ending up in jail. So you have a girl, she's 15, she has a baby, she's probably going to drop out of school, and the man who impregnated her is in jail. So the only option she has is to go back to her parents' house, if she has parents that are willing to help her. And so what happens is her education is stopped right there. They don't try, they never go further. Most of them, they tell you they will try, but then that's probably the end of their education. And they become a burden to their families, and then at the end of the day it becomes a burden to society too. Because this is someone that you have to help. Because later on, she probably won't stop to that. She probably won't stop having kids. Usually after that, she starts at 14, and by the age of 38, she's having 14 kids. That's what, seriously, that's literally what we have at the hospital. And we can't deal with it. Like, Rwanda, the way we are, I mean, we don't have the capacity to have people having 14 kids and not being able to take care of them. So the government has to chip in, and it's just a burden to everyone if you think about it.
Let me take you back a bit. When you receive a 15-year-old and you're trying to engage her, take us to what this child is saying, you know, because as a doctor, of course, you say, what's your name and how old are you? What does she say when she comes to, you know?
Well, most of the time she's brought in by a nurse, and then she's really scared. She has no idea what's going on, and she just feels pain most of the time because she's having contractions. And then you try to talk to her, and most of the times I try to ask her what happened, and she's like, I don't know. Most of the times they don't want to talk about it, and then we always have to explain to them what's going to happen. So you see, we're going to have to take you to the hospital, and then at some point you're going to have to push. And some of these girls are so young, and you can see they have no idea. Sometimes they don't even understand what you're telling them. You're telling this one, sometimes they deliver, and then you try to explain to them how to breastfeed, and it's a mess. Most of the times they don't do it properly, so you have to take more time with them. And so most often we worry when they take them home, because she doesn't know what to do, and sometimes their parents are really pissed at them, so they don't want to deal with them either. So that's the situation. So their babies having babies.
Yeah. I've got a question around. You mentioned encountering this 15-year-old at the point of labor.
Yeah.
Is there any, in terms of majority of cases, maybe you could just give us a rough estimate. Do you normally meet these young ladies at the point of labor, or do you actually experience them before they actually get
during the antenatal?
Sometimes we experience them before, especially when it's a GBV case.
Yeah.
So right at the start, when the police is writing to us, they're like, you know, we want you to examine this victim. And so sometimes we have to break the news to them that they're pregnant. And so the antenatal care most often happens in the health centers.
Yeah.
So we only see them at the beginning when we're telling them they're pregnant, and then at the end when it's time for them to deliver.
We'll leave it there. Let me bring in Dr. Nguruziza as a public health practitioner. Give us a sense of what are these underlying issues. You're a father. Imagine this. This is your daughter.
Yeah.
What is it? Because according to what she's describing, you just have a child who's pregnant, and they are confused and they don't know what to do. What is it?
Yeah. One, I think I want to start with clarifying the age. When they talk about the teenager pregnancy, it's from, most especially from the age of 13 to around 19. So we need to accept that during that age gap, it's when a child is into puberty.
It's growing up.
And at times, some of the characteristics of the puberty age is to be sexually active. So if the child missed the opportunity to be educated by the parents how to handle herself in that age bracket, then she might end up becoming pregnant. Of course, it would be a shock to the father, the mother, and the family, because they would be having lots of expectations. Our daughter is going to become a doctor, an engineer, a minister, etc. So when this girl becomes pregnant, of course, yeah, the parents become shocked and unhappy, but also they feel that there's that shame within themselves that they never did what they were supposed to do as parents, to raise the kid in a proper way and maybe provide the right education and be able to avoid her becoming pregnant.
So I want to bring in the panel on this. We agree that, do you all agree that we have a problem?
I think we do have a problem, and what Dr. Joseph says, I think, just shows you that the magnitude of the problem is a lot bigger. You're assuming that your statements, Dr. Joseph, they create an assumption that the responsibility to raise the children lies solely on the parents. Let's remember that, one, probably they don't have the parents, but also society and school, because I mean, school, at least we're sure most of them will be in school, you know. And I want to give practical examples of where the schools are also failing. If you want to see the best cars in Kigali, you go to secondary schools when it's time for them to leave school, or when it's weekends, when they're being dropped or going back. Look at how our national police has been extremely aggressive in terms of going to night sports, clubs, bars to stop young children from, and actually heavily punish the owners of these night sports from allowing youngins to come into the clubs. That tells you a lot about the problem, because you're not going to be pregnant. You're not going to get pregnant if you have not had sex. And therefore, you're not going to be exposed to sex unless there's somebody who has approached you, you know. So the problem is therefore much bigger. And I want to seriously fault as well the schools, because the children spend actually most of the time at the schools. And I think that's one of the areas where the problem is.
Hold it there. Ephraim, before we come to you, the key word there is sex. So the sex is definitely happening.
Yes.
And I will refer to the 2018 International Family Planning Summit, which took place. And opinion at that summit, I mean, this is a summit where you have experts in reproductive health. But opinion was divided. You know, on one hand, you have governments and faith-based organizations which are saying we need to encourage abstinence, and we need to, mainly abstinence. But what we're seeing actually, the reality is people are having sex. So how do we deal with the fact that people are having sex? And Ephraim, I would like to bring you.
I wanna throw this conversation on its head a bit. There's an interesting statistic. I can't cite the report exactly, but it said that over 80% of teenage pregnancy cases arise from coerced sex, meaning it's not fully okay.
It's not
people argue that about coercion and consent, but the fact of the matter is, it didn't happen at the free will of some of these girls, or at least the complete free will. Now that takes us to another point, and I'll come back to this point of contraception. It comes back to the point of what conversations are we having around the boy child? Because apparently 50% of teenage pregnancies happen amongst fellow teenagers. Yes. Now we come to this aspect of contraception, and I genuinely am a big believer of it. Actually, some time back on the square, I talked about legalizing abortion because I genuinely believe it can be part of a solution. Right. Now, the challenge though is that if you now start to talk about contraception and all of that, if the sex is coerced, if you have not educated the boy child, they're not going to use it.
Hold it there, Ephraim. I would like to bring in Doctor here. Our teenagers are having sex. So we cannot shy away from the fact that sex is happening.
Yeah.
There's sexuality among adolescents. And like you said, the puberty years is really what we're discussing. Now that we have the sex happening, what do we do?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think people are trying to shy away from the reality. So having sex is a right. And each and every human being has a right to sexual and reproductive health. But what the society has missed is to understand that times have changed. Now, the world has become a global village. You can't deny anybody the information. So we need to accept that the teenagers are having sex, and the society, meaning the parents, the teachers, they need to have comprehensive sex education taught to the children. For example, we run a peace building institute. It's a biannual event, and we bring youth across Africa and across Europe and North America. So before we used to have homestays? So they would stay in homes, and I also used to host some youth. So youth from Europe, for those that I hosted, I would host both boys and girls. For those from the age of 17, whenever I would be having breakfast, I would see them taking some pills. So I had to ask them, what are you taking? And they told me, no, these are contraceptives. So why? Are you expecting to have sex? So they told me, no, you never know, you need to be.
Are we talking about Rwandans or some?
No, I'm giving you an example.
European. The context is quite.
The context is quite different, but I'm trying to show you the level at which the
awareness.
The awareness. These girls were 17 and 18, but they had their. So in our society today, I've never seen a girl, even a woman, taking the contraceptives in
public and being very confident
about it.
And the question there is why?
The question is that I think it's the society is somehow confused between culture, religious beliefs, etc. But we need to accept that times have changed, and we need to protect our children and the society at large, because teenage pregnancies have side effects. There is preeclampsia, low birth weight, etc. And with those dangers, the government is going to spend a lot of money trying to treat these young mothers. So it's the right time that we need to break the silence. We need to make sure that young people are empowered so that they can make right decisions, and negotiate safe sex.
I want to make one point, if I may, and Dr. Joseph has just tickled my mind. You see, pregnancy is the only proof that the child had sex.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we know that along the way, probably they have had sex for 5 years from the age of 14, and they have not gotten pregnant. So he raises a very pertinent point. They can get sick, they can, and all these other things. On a lighter note, faith-based organizations once came together, and at this particular forum, I was told that some sects of the born-agains were blaming the mainstream for not giving pregnancy tests to brides-to-be. For example, if you go to Zion or a lot of these born-again churches, they'll first oblige you to go through a pregnancy test before you're married off. And one of the senior pastors in the mainstream churches said, no, but unless we are going to test the ladies for virginity, because the proof that they have never had sex before marriage is not them being pregnant. Yeah. So the moral of the story is, Dr. Joseph raises a very, very pertinent point, that sex education should be more emphasized, not only because of pregnancy, but the dangers that come with starting to be sexually active while still young.
I just want to bring the discussion back to how do we change the culture around, making sex a mystery. Because the fact is, people are having sex, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
But how do we change, the mystery that sex appears to be, that our children can embrace it and protect themselves? And Doctor, I want to take it to you as a father. I mean, what needs to change?
Yeah, what needs to change is that we need to understand that sex is a need. Then, if we know that it's a need, then what comes next is when, how. So when we empower the society, the children, to understand that if you engage into sex at this age, these are
the consequences.
So you need to, in order to avoid these consequences, you need to wait until this age. And when this age, when it comes to this age, you shouldn't have unprotected sex. You need to have condoms. But for the believers, follow what the Bible says and maybe abstain, but that belongs to those, to the believers.
But
yeah.
Doctor, with all due respect, we know that children never listen to their parents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a very general. My children listen to me.
You think they listen to you when you're paying attention. No, just the understanding that when you tell children that you cannot have sex until you're a certain age, does not guarantee that they won't have it. So the question then comes in, and I think this is now where Berna was trying to drive the conversation around even contraceptives, is what can we do in those stages where we make it culturally acceptable that children have, I say children, but let's say teenagers have access to not just the education aspect of it, but the tools that they need to practice a safe sexual, or at least live a safe sexual life.
Yeah, you're bringing something very interesting. Access. The access, that means access to condoms, access to the emergency pill. I've visited some of these youth-friendly centers, Kabuga Youth Center, and there's other former youth center in Huye. But you find they just have is it billboards and pamphlets? But they and also a few condoms, but not contraceptives, not the emergency pill. And fun enough, this emergency pill is very expensive. It is 12,000. So when you talk about accessibility, youth should also be able to access this emergency pill if she has had unprotected sex. So she needs to be able to access the emergency pill and also to be able to have an HIV test to make sure that besides pregnancy, maybe she might acquire HIV. So, and also the sexually transmitted infection. So it has to be a comprehensive and integrated service whereby these teenagers can be able to access a comprehensive package in order to minimize both the unwanted pregnancy, but also other sexually transmitted infections.
I want to bring in Dr. Marie here. Let's again go back to the hospital setting. These teenage mothers, what kind of complications, you know, beyond the difficulty of explaining that they are pregnant, but from the medical perspective, what are the risks?
Well, most of them, like I said, they're very young, so even during the labor process, sometimes they just get so tired and they can't push, so then we have to operate on them, you know. And these are girls who really, after the operation, they can't even take care of their wounds, so then they get secondary infections, and they come back to the hospital. And then there's quite a lot of issues. Some, given, it's really hard to explain to a girl that she has to push really hard, and then sometimes it takes a long time, and then she gets tears and fistulas. So, well, not many fistulas, but then still it happens. So those are one of the most common complications we
how do you feel? How do you feel when you hear a pastor or a priest preaching abstinence?
I get angry. I'm one of those really vocal people. Even today I actually had a case, but he wasn't a teenager. Something I wanted to talk about is, we're talking about comprehensive sexual education for teenagers, but their parents don't know anything either. That's the truth. So I had a 30-something old female in my in admission today, and she refused contraception completely. She's like, no, in the Bible, apparently sometime God said that we have to feel the earth. And so I asked her straight, I'm like, so how many kids does your pastor have? And she's like, 2. I'm like, yeah, follow his example. You know, it's... And
that's one element.
That's one
but
element.
In terms of the human body,
yeah,
is it possible to actually abstain?
No, I don't think it's possible, because like, the example I always give them is, look at our density. We have one of the highest densities in the world, so obviously people are not abstaining in Rwanda. So how about we just stop talking about that? Like, it's good to sometimes talk about it. If you can, good for you.
Well, yes.
But then, if you can't, here are your options, and people just keep focusing on the abstinence part.
But I just wanted to also throw something out there. Like you mentioned this lady refusing on that basis. I know there was something done around an injection. I don't know the medical term for it, but and I think it was even reduced. If you had me to it was even reduced. I think like 200 francs.
It's even free if you give birth in the hospital.
You see, yeah. So like so I know there's an injection, but you'd find women would refuse.
Yeah.
And I think this is now where we now go to the conversation around, because maybe the education has not worked.
Yeah.
The access has not worked. What about that aspect of culture? You know, and I think now that's the question I want to ask, because there's this belief also, and then also link culture to economic standing, because if we look at the majority of these homes where these vulnerable girls, the majority of where these ladies are coming from, you look at the economic status of the economic class of the parents and their families, you realize that these people come from low income earning homes. And I think for me the question, I just want to put it out there for the rest of the panelists, when we have this conversation around this, what are we saying in the grand scheme of things around how we truly address the root of this problem beyond just education and access?
I wanted to shift the discussion a bit to on the other side. We've spent a bit of time talking about the girls.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the men and the boys, you know.
Oh, yeah.
To what extent are they actually involved in this process? If you could just share your experience.
Well, there's vasectomy.
It's not permanent, yes, reversible.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's very,
for
it's very
mature
drastic.
men.
Yeah,
I'm
but then
wondering why
like,
she pointed at me when she was talking about vasectomy.
no. I'm talking about like in terms of contraception, that's available, but not for the younger ones. I understand why they wouldn't want to.
But it's still possible, no?
Yeah, it's still
because
possible.
there's a reversible type, and then you could also freeze some sperm if you want.
No, I wouldn't worry about
that's very expensive.
vasectomy at this point.
Yeah.
We're
No,
talking
but
about coerced sex.
Yeah.
You know, ideally meaning that you have men and boys
who are
forcing
impregnating
themselves. You know,
yeah.
Shed some light on that and how it's a problem.
The thing is, we most often don't even see them at the hospital, and that's a common joke we have with the nurses. Most of these girls come and she's not with any man, not even her father, it's just the mother coming in. So it seems that men are just like, okay, so I'm just going to impregnate you, and that's not my business. You know, that's the situation. That's what we're seeing, at least with those teenage girls. Because if it's the older men, the man is in jail. If it's a teenage boy, he's probably running away. He doesn't want to deal with it, and unless his parents force him, and then he's just going to show up after the delivery, look at the baby, and then that's about it, you know.
We'll take a short break, and we'll be back and to discuss how high rates of teenage pregnancies affect education of these girls, the socio-economic implications of high teenage pregnancies.
nishimiye kuba ari kumwe namwe bahaye ikaze. Yes, umutumirwa wacu uyu munsi
kugira ngo mudusangize mutugaragarize inyungu
ukujya mu kazi nako wagiye no ku ishuri.
Ubwacu twihaye akazi cyane cya mbere, icya kabiri turimo turatanga icyizere ku rubyiruko ko byose bishoboka kandi tugateza imbere igihugu cyacu.
Just yesterday
tubahaye ikaze ikiganiro ni Inspire
isaha y'urubyiruko.
So tonight's edition of The Square, we are discussing the high rates of teenage pregnancies across the country. We would like to take the discussion further and look at the responsibility on the other side. Most of the time, it's the girls that are blamed. It's the girls that will drop out of school. It's the girls that will face most of the consequences in the long term. But let's take a look at the boys and the men that are actually impregnating these girls. What is happening to them?
I think I would want to also just throw in something around the repercussions faced by the girls that is actually institutionalized, that we don't talk about. There was this recent debate in the social media sphere around revoking scholarships for girls. And like I said, the statistic I gave is close to 50%. Actually, half of these cases involve fellow colleagues. So you find that the consequences around this loss of scholarship is only borne by one person. And I think I just wanted to add that context around how even institutions contribute towards this, continue to further this whole divide in terms of how you treat a girl child who is involved in the pregnancy and how you treat the boy child who's involved in the pregnancy.
I want to bring in Dr. Nkurunziza. You were very active on Twitter, you know, when this unfolded, people looking at the faraway conditions. One, to what extent do you think it is a problem when we say you cannot continue school because you're pregnant?
Yeah, what I can see is that, you know, men have enjoyed power even before Jesus Christ. So the society has had this patriarchy monopoly. So whereby even the women or mothers, at times they might also end up blaming these young girls, or maybe they might also end up behaving like the patriarchal system. But to me, I think the responsibility is toward traffic. There is a boy who impregnated a fellow age mate, but there is also a man, because we've seen men with money. Some of the cases among the teenage pregnancies, you find that They are old men. So what should be done is to try and put up policies that hold both boys and men to be responsible of their acts. I think our parliament, they should pass a bill or a law that holds men accountable. They must take care of any girl or even any woman they make pregnant. Two, if a boy, the father of the family has to assume the responsibility. Because we've seen these teenage mothers losing education. Just why? Because a young boy, a classmate, did what? Impregnated her. Two, you might find that families, the boy's family and the girl's family, they know each other. So they will negotiate. The boy continues and the girl stays home. So in such, that's why government have to come up with the policies addressing the prevailing issues within the society. So that's why I will say that we need to make sure that both boys and men and even parents of those teenage boys, because from the research done by CRADO, 49% were colleagues.
That's 49% of
all pregnancy
of
cases.
all the teenage
49%
from 800 and I think 818 sample size. 49% were fellow teenagers. So the parents of those teenagers should assume the responsibility of taking care of the girl. But the girl shouldn't be left to her parents. So it should be a shared responsibility. Even the boy needs to know that he did a mistake. If he's not in prison, then the parents should assume the responsibility.
I want to bring in Charlie here. I mean, the men. What needs to be done?
I want to take a step back a bit around sex education and some of the other initiatives that can be done. If you look at things like Itorero, for example, or school canteens that are in the respective schools, what if whenever these students, I think most schools, when you finish your secondary school before you go to college or university, you go through Torero. What if we distributed free condoms when we are going to those Toreros? What if at school canteens? I'm going to come to that.
The responsibility of men in this whole process, men and boys, how do we hold them to account?
Yeah, I'm going to come to that, Banner, but before the ideas eludes me in terms of initiatives that, because you asked Banner that question, and that how can society come out of this myth and accept that we're actually having sex, but we need responsibility. I don't know if there's any secondary school in Rwanda that has condoms sold in their canteens. Even if they are sold for as cheap as 50 francs. Is that something that we can consider? So, again, some of these things to demystify it and to actually come to terms with the fact that it is being done. Now, on the other one, on responsibility of men, I think boys and men, we need it to be a little bit harsh. And I'll give an example of alcohol and cigarettes. It is banned for you to pick kids from schools in an alcohol or cigarette branded car. In the same breath. Yes, there should be some kind of mechanism in which sometimes the prevention is actually what is better than the cure. Not sometimes, all the time. What can we do so that it's not stylish that this taxi man who has a nice Carina E who comes to pick a girl, and then the girl, her classmates who don't have a guy who comes to pick her or to give her pocket money feel bad, and they are tempted to look for that guy. So we sort of do away with some of these things that can lead to that temptation.
But how?
Yes.
Allow me to go to our social media feed. If we could just check what our audience is telling us on social media. Pieri is saying education of our society about sex is key. Parents should stop considering sex topics at home as crimes. Let kids tell what they know, then from there educate them. In our family, this is a subject to hide any knowledge we have about. More you know, bad imagine. Okay. I think the message is clear. We need to talk about this, you know, in our homes. And there was a suggestion that perhaps we should explore these discussions and include them in Umuguro Bababyeyi. What do you think?
Yeah, there's one thing that we need to understand. If you talk about parents, who are those parents? Maybe are those parents who are maybe too religious? Maybe parents who still think that no, sex is for married people, sex is for old people, and maybe sex should be done in hiding, etc. So if such parents make the parents' council, the parents' evening, they might not be able to educate the teenagers who might be part of that parents' council. So I think that's why there is need to use the available means, schools, even churches, hospitals, to preach, because behavior change is a continuous business. You can't do it once and stop. And two, you can't leave it to the parents, because some parents might not be empowered enough to break the silence.
Yes, briefly.
Yeah, no, I think he's right. But then something I said once before is, yes, parents are very uncomfortable talking about it, fine. But then one thing I had once suggested was to let us doctors or whoever is comfortable teaching the kids about it, do it. But then the thing is, the moment we step up and we say we want to educate those kids, people show up and they're like, nope.
Don't tell my child about sex.
Yeah, you know. So there's basically, you always have these people blocking us. So I think it would be great if the government started from, let's say, Reb, or the one in charge of education.
Yes.
It's like, this is the curriculum. And you know what, this is happening in school. The doctors are going to go in and teach about it. That way, you're not having people blocking you. You're not having the church rising up saying, that's a sin. You know.
Once it becomes policy, it's then a
it's
lot
a policy,
easier
yeah.
to
So we have to take drastic measures here.
Let's go to our second tweet. This is from Umurunji Cynthia. This is going to be a very, very good conversation. Sex is normal. Normal to have those feelings. Let's stop pretending our kids are some weird creatures. Frank discussion about sex, access to contraception, those among other things don't work. What do you think?
Oh, she's right. We have to talk about it. And then something else, we always talk about contraception, and I like the fact that you brought in abortion. I always tell them, you have to pick a battle. You can't say, I'm not legalizing abortion, and say, I don't want contraception to be available to you. Pick a battle. Pick one. You know, either you legalize abortion, and so we deal with the problem, and some people will say, no, then you're promoting sex. They're already having sex.
Yeah, whether you promote it or not.
Yeah, it's already happening. So just
our last tweet is from Charles. Charles is saying, good evening. This problem will never end unless parents themselves are engaged in the problem. You will find a parent fearing to tell a girl about secondary female characters. Really, we need to teach children. We need to teach these parents before teaching the teenagers. Yeah. I think someone mentioned that before. Doctor, if you could chip in, what do we need to tell the parents?
Yeah, one.
And maybe it is at the Mugoro that or the Muganda meetings. The Muganda meetings. Yeah, that we need to start with the parents.
Yeah, we need to break this. But also at the policy level, what is being advertised is the age at which one is supposed to get married. But what needs also to be preached is that anyone who wants to engage in sexual intercourse, the right age is 18.
Oh yeah, that's the law.
Anybody who engages and maybe impregnates a girl below that age you'll be jailed, I think it is 25 years.
Up to 25 years.
So the young people also will grow knowing that at 18, I'll be having the liberty. But people talk about the age for marriage, 21. And they forget that before 21, the body is
dying.
The body is dying. The feeling. So the thing that we need to have the parents to understand, because when a boy impregnates a colleague, you might be held accountable. If it's your daughter, then you're going to face the side effects and the dangers that are associated with teenager pregnancies. So parents are key, but we want also the government to be involved in making sure that the policies are streamlined. It's not only the marriage age, even the age to have sex should be made clear that 18.
So you're agreeing that it should be 18?
The
sex age? Because obviously it's not working out.
I want to understand where Dr. Marie is coming from. You're advocating for...
No, I'm not advocating.
For catching them young?
Don't judge.
No.
What age is realistic?
To me, it's like you can't say what... I had a kid at 12 already having sex in my office. So telling them the age of 18, it doesn't make sense to me because they're not following it anyway.
Yeah, no, but we need to also the physiological. There are some physiological changes. Yeah. We've seen even girls going into periods at the age of 8, etc.
Yeah.
But we can't. There is always to have some limitations and guidance. Mm-hmm. At least above 18 years, that is, the body is mature, and maybe even the girl knows what she's doing, and even the boy knows what he's doing. Below that, it is debatable, but to me, I think we can empower the society to be able to accept that we need to break the silence and teach our kids when to have sex, and maybe how to have safe sex. Yeah. That will contribute towards minimizing teenager pregnancies and also sexually transmitted infections and other issues associated with the side effects of teenager pregnancies.
Clearly, what's coming out of this panel is that the current approach is not working, and the approach where we sort of bury our heads in sand and say this is not happening. The reality is the sex is happening. Now, as we conclude, I wanted us to get your parting shots on the strategy. We've had the ABC strategy, abstinence, being faithful, and condoms. One could add legalizing abortion. And I wanted to hear your thoughts. Charles, well, what do you think works? Abortion?
I think it's a combination of all those, but my parting shot is really not that, so I beg that you excuse me from the ABC. Recently, I think it would be doing our audience unfair if we did not quickly comment on the Fawe Girls scandal, and where some girls were sacked and denied to do exams because they were found pregnant. I'm wondering if next year it happens in the same school, what they will do, and the following year what they will do for both O levels and A levels. So let's wake up. Let's wake up. That's really my parting shot. Let's realize that sex education is extremely key. It helps nobody, not even the school itself, to be reactionary. People having sex, let's teach them how to have it and have it safely.
Yeah, and perhaps it has to change from focusing on the victim.
Yes.
Because as it is, we are just piling blame on the victim and making it worse for them.
Indeed, and as I said earlier, the only proof is that they've had sex is pregnancy, whereas that's not helping.
Dr. Marie, the approach, abstinence, abortion, what do we do? What do we need?
I think the government need to take drastic measures. It's more like just put in laws. Like I think one of the laws that they're trying to change is that teenagers below the age of 18 don't have to go with parents to get contraception. I think that's a start already. But then we need more laws. Like, I think the government should just intervene in case of the faraway situation. Be like, it doesn't make sense to sack a girl because she got pregnant. If you want, you can have different timetables, because she probably has to breastfeed, so make her come in the evening or something. But then you can't sack someone because she got pregnant. I think that it's hindering on her right to education. So
let me be the devil's advocate here. I think the thinking behind Fawe is to sort of say the spirit of you going to school is not to get pregnant. You know, now that can come both ways.
yeah.
So don't you think we have to find a way of encouraging girls that you shouldn't be getting pregnant? Because it's not always.
But
as
is
much
it
as
Fawe Girls' School?
Yes,
That's
it
the
is.
thing.
I rest my case.
Yeah, no, I think everyone knows that they shouldn't get pregnant below the age of 18. You don't need to be a genius.
No, they don't, actually.
No. I think, trust me, they know. When they come, they're really ashamed and they feel bad about it. You know, so everyone, you know it's going to be messy for you if you get pregnant below the age of 18. You don't need to scream it out loud. So my point is, everyone out there, that's all they're talking about. The parents are saying it. The churches are saying it, the schools are saying it. We know it's not okay for you to get pregnant below the age of 18. But then if it happens, it happened. So what do we do? You know, from there, yeah, you don't need to crucify.
So in terms of policy, what needs to change?
What needs to change is we need to tell the schools that they shouldn't sack the girls once they get pregnant. They just need to find an alternative for them. But then you can't sack someone and take away her scholarship. Like I said, most of them already drop out of school. So now, on top of that, you took away her scholarships. She's not going to be able to pay for it and pay for a kid that she just had. That doesn't make sense. It's adding problems on top of problems.
Yeah, and perhaps we'll have another show talking about the cost of uneducating the girl child.
Yeah.
Dr. Joseph, your thoughts on the approach. What needs to change?
Yeah, I think what needs to change is that we need to stop behaving like an ostrich, which hides its head in the sun and think that people are not seeing it. We need to accept that the generations have changed. Each generation has its own challenges. So we have an active young generation. I know I call it Wakanda generation that has access to phones, each and everything. There is urbanization. So what needs to be done is, at the policy level, there's a need for comprehensive. It should be a must in all schools, irrespective of being faith-based or traditional, comprehensive sexual education, and to have teenagers empowered, and to make sure that contraceptives are available. They have access to these contraceptives, so that those who are engaging in sexual intercourse can be able to access them. But then we need also to look at the options for those teenage mothers who accidentally who have become pregnant. We need to have, the society needs to accept and be able to organize an adoption system, because there are some people who can't have kids or who can't make babies, and they would be willing to adopt. Two, we need to build a strong support system, because if you look into our histories, you would find that
I'm afraid.
And also there is need. When it comes to abortion, at times it's the lady that should decide to either have it or not. But then we need to have a conducive legal framework that would facilitate this, because we find that the poor don't have access to safe abortion, but the rich, they'll fly and have access to safe abortion. So we need to have a conducive legal system that facilitates both the rich and the poor to be able to have proper services.
And with that, we've come, Ephraim, bear with me. Time is not on our side. And with that, we've come to the end of tonight's edition of The Square. Join us every Wednesday. Don't miss the repeats every Thursday at 2 p.m. We would like to thank very much our sponsors, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee. See you all next week. Good evening.